All right, Luke, looking at the weekly movers over here. No big moves this week, actually. You've only highlighted two names. What's going on with the juniors?
Yeah, I think it was a good week to for the juniors again, or not again, not again. Finally, um, there are a couple of interesting names in this list, but I decided to only highlight two this week. Both of them are very different from each other. Rusoro is a company that was a mining company in Venezuela in between 2006, 7, and 2011. This company um, went into Venezuela because it's probably one of the best places on earth to look for gold. It is not the best place on earth to do permitting or to be certain about the mining law, but it's probably one of the few places where you can still walk up and drill off a big gold deposit fairly quickly. But certain jurisdictions are just not open to that, and they bought properties from Hecla, they bought properties from gold fields, and even spent, I think, about 500 million on the last one towards gold fields to get that project. So they became a really big Venezuela focused company with mining, development, exploration, and from a mining point, from an exploration point of view, in a really good area. But then in 2011, when they probably had 12 million ounces in their books and maybe 6 million of reserves, um, the Venezuelan president Hugo Chavez, he nationalized the gold industry and seized all the assets. So I think it was not long before that they did a 200 million financing at $2.50. So it was a big company, quite a big company, and um, so when the seizure took place, the company was just planning to expand their Choco 10 project, which had a really good feasibility study with $1 billion MPV and a 40% IRR. So what happened is that they started arbitration, and this took a number of years. But in 2016, there was an award in favor of Rusoro, who got close to $1 billion US dollars granted, and another 200 million of interest, so 1.2 billion US dollar. But of course, how to collect such a payment? That's especially if you're dealing with a government like Venezuela. So it took another 2 years, and they reached a settlement with the government, and the settlement was 1.3 billion with an initial payment of 100 million. That 100 million was paid to a Canadian bank, but a Canadian bank refused to advance it to Rusoro because of the sanctions that were um, the Venezuelan sanctions by I think by the US and maybe by Canada as well. So I mean, they had this 1.3 billion settlement, but how to get that money? So every time when there was some good news, you saw the stock spike a little bit and back down again. I think the hopes of people to ever see any money back was disappearing. And so recently in April, Risoro announced another update, and they said update on the award for the collection of the recent awards. So they got an update from the Delaware court, and it was a pretty smart thing they did. There is apparently a company called Petróleos de Venezuela. It's like an oil company, and the court found that this is an alter ego of the Venezuelan government. And this company has a subsidiary in the US and is the fifth largest independent oil refiner in the US. So the court said, yes, that is in fact Venezuela. So we consider that company Venezuela, and we will, see if we can get that money from that subsidiary. So right now there are a couple of steps involved. I mean, I'm not going to go into the all the legal actions, but there's a person appointed, a master, I think they call him, and he needs to make a plan how to sell shares or sell assets to make money available for people like Risoro, because Risoro is, I think, not the only company still claiming funds. So there's still some uncertainty, but this week Risoro showed up in the list of biggest movers, and I think it is probably because people think they may actually have a chance. And I just looked up the the market cap, and so the market cap right now, it moved from 34 million to 138 million. So it's almost a four-bagger from a couple of months ago. They have 170 million in liabilities, and if the settlement will still be 1.5, because with interest, it's currently I think 1.7 or 1.5 US billion dollars. So what does that mean? Even if they can just get 1 billion Canadian, which is much less, that would still be $2 a share. So I'm very curious, because in most cases it never works out. In this case, well, looking at the market, it may actually work out, but that would mean that there's maybe still a 10-bagger from here. I'm not saying it will, because it's completely. I wouldn't bet on these things where, as a shareholder, you're just hoping. But it is a very interesting one, especially considering that this was really a company trying to build a big Venezuelan gold project, and failed, but may get 1.5 billion instead.
Okay, but this is again one of those situations in where I'm wondering, does somebody know something more than I do, or is somebody just being a gambler more than I am? Because it's one of those two things, right?
It's always. I think there's always in any scenario, any company, there's always someone who knows more than you. If I even the companies my biggest positions where I really am regularly in contact with the company, and probably one of the best informed investors outside of the company, because I just talk to them a lot. There's always the market always knows a bit more. There's just not just in mining, but everywhere. The markets always know a bit more, and in this case, I don't think this is just a couple of gamblers. I think there's a bit more certainty maybe right now. I wouldn't call it certainty, but the likelihood is increased. And $1.5 billion. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said no way. But if they can actually enforce that on that company, that US-based company, that they call a Venezuela government entity, well, then suddenly, of course, that money may be available for them. So we'll see how that ends. I'm interested. I have considered buying a year or two ago just for a small bet, as you said, but then I would just make a very small bet and forget about it. Is it less risky right now at 21 cents than it was at 6 cents? Not sure. I find it pretty interesting, because if this happens, it's probably one of the first times where a company can really collect a big check from a government like this.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, it sounds like a reach to me, but it's not like stuff like that could happen, I guess, and that's where you end up missing out. Now, on stuff like that, I'm almost like, I don't even mind if I would miss out on something like that, because it's what I'm mostly thinking about myself is, how do I create a system that works over and over again? And I don't think you can create a system doing these type of things. Like this could be, a bet and get lucky at best.
I completely agree. This is a bet. Even right now that the court, I mean, you can read all the court documents and you can specialize yourself up to a certain level, but even then, it's still a bet, I think. So I agree. If you are systematic and you want to, you can accept missing out on big gainers, and that's what you should do, I think. Then you should avoid this thing. But I found it interesting. I looked into the history of Rusoro, how it started, what they did, who was involved. Actually, some pretty good people, actually. There's even a Russian link, because the Russians had a better connection to Venezuela than the US had at the time, or maybe still. And so there's some Russian people connected to the company, so it's an interesting story. I mean, you can talk about this for a much longer time, but I just summarized it to show the listeners what this involves. This story.
It is. Yeah. It's an interesting business story overall.
Yeah.
So good for you for bringing it up, and you also get to make fun of me if they actually get the money granted, and I'm like, no, I'm just gonna ignore this, and this goes 10x.
I think it's smart in any case, even if it goes 10x from here in a week, which I don't think will happen. But even if, it's good to say no to things when you're uncertain about something and wait for something that you are more certain about, because that's, I think, the most difficult thing in this mining industry. Every day, new opportunities present themselves, and they sometimes sounds very good, or maybe even too good to be true.
Mm.
And I think saying no to a lot of things is crucial to make money in the end. And that's why I think it's a good thing not to do this, but it's still an interesting one that I'm going to be following.
Yeah, for sure. It's what Buffett said, right? That you don't have to bat every time. You can wait for the softball basically, and then hit it out of the park when you actually know what you're doing. So yeah.
And I think that applies even more to the mining industry than maybe to the things he invests in, because his quality level of the Coca-Colas and the Apples, you could make a mistake and still have some money left. In the mining industry, you could make a mistake and have no money left. So
it's true.
yeah, I think it applies to this business very well.
All right, what's next? Empire Metals. That's a smaller company now. I'm getting more interested there. What's happening?
Yeah, this is also a very interesting one. When a company, an exploration company, announces a giant copper and titanium mineral system confirmed at Pitfield project, including new high-grade titanium discovery. Titanium, sorry. This is the headline that catches the eye. This is in London, and I have a personal rule for myself only to buy a London listed stock if there's a real discovery hole, not a potential visible gold, whatever, not trenching, not surface sampling, not IP blobs, really big numbers. And even though this headline seems amazing, this company, I listened to a long presentation a couple of days ago, and I listened to it today, but they did it after the announcement. And they think they have a very good piece of ground. It's pretty close to Chalice. Chalice made this big nickel discovery, and they staked the Pitfield project. It's a very big project looking for what they call giant copper projects, and they want a giant. In the presentation, the name giant comes back and back and back, and they think this project has the potential. And this district for sure has a couple of very big mining companies also already decades ago. And could there be a big copper project on their property? Yes. They were expecting to see copper numbers, and they found some copper numbers, but anomalous. The titanium numbers are pretty high, but I don't know much about the titanium industry, so I did some work on it. I looked into it. It's a very special sort of mineral, I think. So I'm gonna leave it for the moment. I'm gonna follow it because they are gonna drill. They have a lot of targets, and they're gonna drill for copper as well, high grade copper, big systems. So the story is good. They seem to be serious about things. It's not just we want to promote it with this headline. But as you often see in the London market, and I also posted, I sent you this chart. The initial reaction is very positive, and then it just goes back to where it originally was. It moved like 60-70%, I think, and now it's almost back to where it started. No, not completely, but close.
But this happens often in the London market. You've told me that before.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. Even with real discoveries, like Greatland took a long time. They hit 220 meters of 2 or 3 grams gold. It was pretty deep, but they hit 4.5 grams over 400 meters or 300 meters, and even then it took another 6, 7, 8 months before the market catched on to it. So I think in London you have even more time than in a bad market in Canada. You have time to evaluate the news, think about it a bit more, and if it like Mariana with Hot Maiden, Sol Gold also took some time before they got their market action. So there are a couple of really good discoveries that started in London, at least at the exchange there. But you have to be very careful, because I've seen a couple of them that seemed to be a discovery and didn't work out at all. Or just the market, it's a weird market with market makers that have a pretty funny role. You have to almost call the market maker to buy some stock from them, or otherwise you have to go into the auction system. It's a funny system, but I think it makes sense to keep an eye on it, because these companies are not always bad companies. It's just I don't like the market. Doesn't mean that the companies are bad. They tend to issue a lot of stock, way more than what we like in Canada, even more than in Australia. So $1 billion shares outstanding is no problem for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you find a real discovery, it could still work out. That's a different philosophy.
I don't know if this is a real discovery though, because it says that they confirmed the presence of a metal-rich system, and then they say confirmed, and then in the next sentence they say these fluids are thought to be responsible for the
Yeah,
significant enrichment.
yeah,
So, and they say that it's 40 kilometers by 8 kilometers, which is just it would be the absolute biggest thing in the world.
yeah.
So I don't know if this is a real discovery,
They
but
they, they have drilled a series like I don't remember the number. I think 10 or 15 holes, indeed over like a 40-kilometer project, and they have hit in several locations high grade titanium. I mean, for me, it's also too early to call this a real discovery. The headline is, screaming. I listened to the interview thinking that I wouldn't like it because I don't like too much of this stuff, these types of headlines, without having the real, without really having enough data yet. But after watching the video, I have the impression that they are serious. So I think I would suggest follow it. Don't buy it necessarily. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Last slide they have sent me is actually probably the most exciting thing to talk about this week. They're launching an app. So go ahead and tell me more about how is that going to help me make money? Tell me that.
Yeah. So I will send you a video so that you can show that. It's an app that we have been developing. The app itself is quite minimalistic. It has just 2 features or 3 features right now. It's a mining news overview because if you want to invest in junior miners, you need to have the news, and I think it's the better one because you want to know what is the price of the company, the market cap of the company, what news are they bringing out. But in addition to that, what we do is we have developed a system and of course it's a big buzzword nowadays, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And our system now recognizes, first of all, what type of news it is. So it recognizes, for example, this is drill news, this is a resource statement, this is a private placement, or sometimes there are several different topics in a news release. We've noticed that sometimes it tells us, hey, there's a private placement, and I think, oh, that must be wrong. And then at the end of the news release, it picked it up. So we have trained it for a long time, and we have such a big database right now trained that the machine learning system starts to recognize what topic it is independent where it is within the news release. We also built a feature which is also quite exciting where it detects, and now I have to be careful, where it predicts potential discoveries. And of course you can only do that by words because we didn't train a geological, a sort of new geo. But we have entered all the discovery announcements, big ones, small ones, and potential ones, into a big system. And that system, we trained the system, and now it's giving a rating. And if the rating gets over 80%, then the company at least believes it's a discovery because they word it like this. And we tested it. Every big discovery that was announced in the last couple of years was picked up by the system. So we will call that label potential discovery. We will not connect any rights to that, so we could miss one. We could call something a potential discovery that is far away from a discovery. But my experience is over the last couple of months, but especially weeks, that the system became pretty good, and it's giving you, it's looking at grades, it's looking at descriptions, it's just comparing, a big database of discovery announcements to every announcement that comes out within a matter of seconds. So the news comes in, it gets a label, potential discovery, drill result, private placement, whatever it is, and immediately, also automatically, it detects where are the drill results, it screens it and puts it into our drill database. So also real time, without any delay, all the drill results are included. That means every grade, intercept, the width, from what depth it is, and which metals are included. And it sorts it based on gold equivalent gram meters, so that everybody can get an overview from top to bottom, from good to bad. And the third thing is, and that will be out in about a month or two, is that people can also connect alerts to it. You can say, alert me when there's a potential discovery, or alert me when there is a drill intercept above 100 gram meters. That's a system that we are almost ready with, but we still need to test it. And that's going to be in the app as well with more features, but that's for next time.